Welcome to 2 Men in the Middle, Democracy in Flyover Country. From here, we'll discuss today's topics from a Midwestern perspective with our boots firmly on the ground in a red state. I'm Mike McCammon.
I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Kinnig.
Mike's back.
I'm back.
And why are you back, Mike?
Rumor has it that this is the 200th episode of 2 Men in the Middle.
This is the 200th episode of 2 Men in the Middle.
Milestone.
A milestone. Do you guys listen to any straight amateur podcast? I mean, it can get no more amateur than what I'm looking at right now. Do you guys listen to any of those?
The equipment grade upgrade here is pretty high. I would not call this amateur.
Of all the equipment that you see here, represents about $150, maybe.
And it might be all 4 years old too.
More than that. These mic stands are $10
Yeah,
off
but you got these
Amazon.
spit things now. I didn't have this. Do you guys spit more than I used to or something? That's why I have this big.
Well, we put a sock over it for a while, but we felt kind of
sock.
stupid talking
there
into
you
a
go.
sock. So yes, we have the professional spit guard.
What do they call it? Is that what they call it?
I think so.
Okay.
And these are like $3 too on Amazon. So my point being is that it's pretty cheap from an equipment perspective to put a podcast together. That's why there's a million of them.
That's right.
It is remarkable that, we talked about it when we first started, and I know, Brandon, we've talked about it, all three of us, is that it's crazy that basically anyone with, basically half a brain can start a podcast, about anything. And you can go out and find topics about anything, online. It's pretty incredible.
No, there's really no barriers to entry.
No, there's zero.
You see that online.
And but that's also kind of a negative too, because there is no barriers. Then you can get a whole bunch of kooks.
No.
Everybody fashions him or herself as an expert in anything and everything.
And it's the only way you can stand out is by being super crazy. And then so this just kind of just keeps everything getting more crazy and more crazy and more crazy.
Mike, do you remember the year we started this thing?
Well, it would have been probably 2018. Is that right?
2018.
Yeah, 2018.
It's been 6 years.
Wow.
Do you remember the podcast?
And Trump's running again for office.
we should be entering the final phases of Trump's political career.
Well, I thought it was already over.
Well, no, it's far from over.
All of us were hoping it had been over. But
Most presidents reelected. We could be sitting here with 6 months to go without Trump, but that's not where we're at. But do you remember why we decided at work one day we're going to start a podcast? What was the original mission of what we were trying to do?
The way I remember it was that we basically would go out to lunch and sit around and bitch about politics.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, and then I'd go home and I'd listen to Pod Save America.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these folks, they're really good, but they have no clue what's happening in the middle of the country. They have very much a coastal, they have a very coastal view of the world. And I'm like, there's a space, literally, a gap in the market of doing a podcast that takes a Midwestern perspective on the topics. Now, I had a lot of aspirations for us doing guests, and maybe we do like a road show out to Western Kansas and sit down in the cafe in the little town and interview the
effort, Mike.
Well, I was going to say interview the the red hats out there and see what they're really thinking. And
man on the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Style.
But like I said, that would take some effort and a whole bunch of time, and the wave of advertisers came in and kind of washed away that interest and kind of said, hey, we'll just do the studio thing. We're just doing the studio thing.
The one thing that I can tell people is, I've said this before, it literally takes, after we leave this room, it's 10 minutes of effort. If that, to make this podcast. An audio-only podcast is one of the easiest things to put together.
It's crazy.
That's why there's 2 million of them on the Apple Store.
For full disclosure, and Brandon doesn't know this, but it took Craig about 8 months to figure out how to do the podcasting cloud thing. We remember how we met twice over the last 6 months just trying to figure out how to get off the old website and get on the new website.
We did have a back-end change.
Well, actually, the problem was that 6 years ago or whatever, the number of podcasting tools was not as numerous.
Yeah.
So the way you did is you did a WordPress site and you found a plugin to do your publishing, and that's how we set up the site initially. And actually, what was the most complicated part is tearing that down and putting it over into a service.
Yeah.
And getting it all to work. And then actually, the most important part was getting it to still see the old episodes that we had originally had on the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's our fault for being early and not being late. I guess maybe.
Who would have thought?
One of the things that we talked about why we wanted to do this is you and I considered ourselves pretty up to date and pretty knowledgeable in politics. And I recall we were sitting at work one day, and we decided it's time for both of us to realize we don't really know that much. Because what we thought we knew by 2018, Trump had thrown that in the dumpster.
I don't know, Brandon, just to bring him into the story, but I know that 2016, when Trump won the election, basically the thing I kept asking every person that I knew that did marketing for a living, how the hell did this happen? There were all these things that Trump did in the last 2 months of the campaign that literally killed.
Stay centered on your mic, Mike.
What's that?
You got to center up with your mic.
I know, center up on the mic.
That's my first time yelling at Mike how to talk on a microphone.
It'll happen more.
It'll happen again.
But it was that's the thing we kept talking about is what happened, because it violated every rule of how you do good marketing.
Yeah, well, and I think that it was such an aberration, in terms of what we expect out of retail campaign politics, what we saw in 2016. And I think part of it was that, in real time, if you were there, it was difficult to even analyze the impact that Trump was having because things were moving so quickly on the ground.
Right.
You talk about the Comey investigation being opened and then closed and then reopened, and the impact of that, and the Access Hollywood tape. There was just so much that happened with Russia in such a short period of time. And that was also the year, too, that polling organizations failed miserably.
Oh, yeah. They missed big time.
They missed these voters who tended not to get out and vote, the infrequent voters, and so that was a large portion of Trump's victory, helped propel him to victory. So there were a lot of paradigms in campaign politics that didn't hold up in terms of campaign or election modeling and forecasting who would turn out to vote. All of that was turned upside down.
So has it gotten better? Are we going to be able to predict it this time?
I'm not confident. The problem is, too, that the polling has been back and forth the last several cycles. Some of it has been off. It was off in 2022, a little bit different because that was midterms, different turnout modeling.
Right.
But I still think we're in a scenario where it's not exact. And I think that in addition to just a change in technology and reaching voters is becoming harder and harder, getting people who will pick up the phone and actually...
I don't, we do market research in my job, and it's really difficult compared to what it used to be. Again, do people, do you pick up the phone if it's a phone number you've never seen before?
No.
Never. Do you read an email from someone you've never heard of before? Do you dig in your spam? I don't even know how you recruit people to even participate in the surveys. And so it's I used to joke around even, 30 years ago, I used to always joke that even focus groups, as a research methodology, is really only testing the people that are available between 6 and 8 p.m. on a weeknight and want to get an extra $50 in dinner. So it's a very, the sampling process was pretty flawed, but I know that they account for that in these kind of bigger models, but still, they obviously missed it in 2016.
The thing that got me in 2016 was that the Clinton dynasty lost. I never thought that could happen. Bill Clinton is the most popular president of certainly of my lifetime.
Obama.
Oh, Clinton was as popular as Obama.
You think so?
Oh, I think so. I think so. Amongst Democrats? Let's put it this way. Clinton and Obama are in the top 5 of popular presidents in our lifetime.
Oh, I would say
probably 1, 2. Maybe.
Well, and Clinton did do a pretty good job at threading the needle of kind of going down the middle.
Did.
Obama did not. He was left at middle.
Yeah.
But he had a much more aspirational story, I think.
But here you have Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and the entire Clinton dynasty behind them, and they get.
But what about the server with all the emails, Craig?
But they get beat by the fat orange guy on The Apprentice.
Well, I know we talked about this either at work or in the early podcast that basically. I think everyone in the Republican Party, everyone in the press, just actually loved having Trump involved because it kept so many eyes.
Yeah.
There's so many eyes on them. And it's oh my God, I have to watch this train wreck. This is going to be absolutely. And then all of a sudden, he kept winning. What the hell is going on?
Well, and I can tell you, somebody who was still a Republican at that time, but already on the outs in the party and migrating.
It's like you had cancer at that time, but you got over it or something.
Right. It was a very odd time politically. But I can tell you that most of the establishment within the party, if you had talked to them one-on-one, off the record, they were saying, no, Trump was going to lose. He's going to lose. This is
Everyone thought that.
But I think people underestimated some of the fatal flaws of the Clinton campaign. You had the basket of deplorables comment that got blown up.
Yeah, that was bad.
And that was extremely bad because it allowed Trump to really typecast Clinton, you know, with this narrative that she was out of touch, looked down upon middle America, rural America.
It worked.
And then you have the fact that just the campaign itself, you know, they did a campaign in Wisconsin. They took Wisconsin and Michigan for granted. These blue wall states that you needed. There should have been a very proactive effort with on the ground, get out the vote organization in those states, and it wasn't there because they took them for granted.
Yeah.
Which thankfully won't happen this year, and it didn't happen in 2020. But I think it goes to show, too, that if you are part of a dynasty and you're relying on, political practices from, 20, 25 years ago, like you have to adapt. And more than anything, we know that it's all a turnout game, and you get any and every last voter out. You don't take for granted your blue wall states, because those have been changing. And if they had followed the polls, they would have realized that as well. But they didn't act on it.
See, now, Mike, you're standing too close to your microphone, so you got to step out when you're not talking and step in when that's how the pros do it.
Normally, if this
Mike.
was a professional thing, I'd have like a little piece of tape on the floor so I know exactly
where
I'm supposed to stand.
The last time we did this, we did 3 guys, 2 mics. Which actually worked pretty good because it keeps the third person from talking.
Okay.
The reason I thought the podcast was a good idea is I was listening to a Sunday podcast by Ben Shapiro who had Tucker Carlson on.
Oh, God.
And Tucker Carlson made the crystal clear, extremely salient point that if you landed here from, let's say you'd been in a coma for 30 years in the United States, and you woke up and the first thing they told you and said, the only thing we're going to tell you about the country you live in is Donald Trump is the president, you would know shit's gone wrong.
Right.
That's the only data point that you need. We elected that guy in 2016. That was a huge red flare. Something is incredibly off in the United States.
Well, I know also, and anyone that knows me, that 2016 to 2019 period was a time for me like, okay, I can't just sit back and just let this happen. Like, I got to do something. So that's why I thought, okay, we start podcasting. Like, maybe that's a way to start. And then I did, I'm going to run for office. I'm going to go interview the people that are going to represent me to decide if they're going to be able to beat Kevin Yoder and if they're any good. And then I just said, okay, I don't think anyone really good, so I'm going to go ahead and run myself. And then that put me on that whole cycle of that trip, which ended, of course, in August.
But you learned a lot about that, and a lot about how our political system works.
Well, I told, and now that it's in my rearview mirror so far back, I keep telling people that, like, I was cynical about politics, and it didn't make me less cynical. Because it really, the thing that I learned the most in that, well, there are a lot of things I learned, but when it comes directly to policy, is that policy doesn't matter.
Policy is secondary, if even
on
the radar
matter
at all.
It is all about like how you feel about the identities that are sitting in front of you, and like, because also in the Democratic primary, there's not a lot of space between every candidate. Like, you're not, everyone has kind of the same, pro-choice view. Everyone's got kind of like, we need to have some sort of solution for healthcare. We got to, stop the gun violence. Like, I mean, there's not a lot of space on the candidates, and so it really becomes okay, who fits the narrative of the personality and the that particular part of the equation. And it was Me Too. Yeah. And it was actually, I need to come up with a Me Too, not me, or something like that. Kind of like
that would have been a risk.
No, I'm just saying
that would have been a hell of a button.
I'm just saying is that
Me Too, not me.
It was during the Me Too time, but it was not me.
I get it. What I'm saying is, I would have really liked to seen the
those
effort.
People, not them.
I really would have liked to see a finished product. You would have come up with
Me
that.
Too, not them, or something like that.
Yeah,
and them being old white people.
Who knew? I mean, especially now with the they them. Who knew what you're talking about at that point?
Yeah.
Well, and your race was a good example of intersectionality and how much of a factor that was in a Democratic primary.
That's a really big word. Can you define that for our audience?
So that's looking at the status of one's gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation,
identity
overall
politics.
Identity politics. Yeah,
identity politics.
That's a good definition.
You came up against a candidate who was a brown female who recognized that the only thing I'm interested in is will you punch somebody in the mouth.
Yeah.
And I don't care about anything else. I'm so put off by the fat orange man. I need somebody who just will let me know. I'll throw down if I have to.
Yeah.
And I think with you, that's all she talked
Democrats
about.
wanted a fighter.
That's right.
Yeah,
Her commercials were her boxing.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. That was her narrative.
It was a good example of the person who looked the right way for the time, had the right message, and that was it.
Yeah, well, and you could argue in a very other strange way. I had a good friend that worked on some of the key creative assets for Obama's campaign. And I always tell Saul, I'm like, hey, it's really great what you did. And like, you're, part of making Obama, what he was. He goes, well, actually, it was really more the candidate and the time and the message. Mm-hmm. So again, it's the same thing. It's the candidate, the time that we are in, and then the message. And, and I wish the Democrats would have taken an opportunity to kind of, at the presidential level for this cycle, recognize that and not put Biden back up again. Because I think someone that would have been, 20 years younger and halfway reasonable would have mopped the thing up, because then there'd be no way to let Trump get in the air.
And the Democrats have those figures in the party. I mean, there's a strong bench of governors and of members of Congress.
Newsom's one of the ones that immediately comes to mind.
Brandon,
I don't get it.
At the top of the ticket, if it were Gretchen Whitmer as president and Raphael Warnock as vice president, do you think that could beat a Trump ticket?
I think so, absolutely.
I think easily
absolutely.
It would beat a Trump ticket.
I mean, Whitmer rode to re-election on a huge wave. I mean, she expanded her margin. I mean, and you have governors now. You have Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, very pragmatic, popular.
I don't
Jared
understand.
Polis of Colorado.
Why does the party not let him in?
Because the president, if the president of the United States decide he's going to run, there is absolutely nothing you can do about that. The parties have lost so much power and so much influence, basically because of small donation raising and a whole bunch of other stuff. You have who has the leverage to muscle Joe Biden out of that position?
Yeah,
nobody does. It's the same thing with Trump on the Republican Party. He owns the Republican Party lock, stock, and barrel. There's nobody going to challenge that.
And this is ultimately, I mean, there's a lot of factors for why Biden's in a close race, and should it be. And you can go down the policy rabbit hole. But I think, number one, if you go back to 2020, and Craig and I have talked about this, a lot of people who voted for Biden, especially when you get into the squishy middle and the moderate R's and the suburbs, did so because they were turned off by Trump, and they thought Biden will be a caretaker president. He will only serve one term, and then there will be somebody new. And so, tacitly, even if Biden
mostly right.
Biden may have not been saying that daily, but he gave the indication that might likely be the fact. So when he chose not to do that and chose to run again, I think many people saw that it was kind of a betrayal, because it's like, I didn't elect you under those circumstances. That was a...
Well, I also don't. This betrayal thing is an important piece of the puzzle, because we do have to get everyone out that voted for Biden the last time to vote again, and no, you're saying we don't have to.
We're never going to get 81 million people to vote for Biden again. Well, that's never going to happen.
But I'm saying this betrayal thing is going to hurt that number even more.
Absolutely.
Because I've been reading all this stuff about immigration the last couple of weeks, and how even that's kind of an issue for asylum seekers. To me, seemed like it was a pretty core D issue that you kind of don't go running towards the conservative path of locking things down. But it's also a little betrayed by that as well.
Well, I agree, but I feel like it's also an issue. That's an issue too, where I empathize, because it's a both sides thing. Because if he did take any kind of action, he's getting hammered over that. I mean, the Democrats have been the only ones who have tried to solve that with the consensus measure that was killed by the MAGA Republicans in the Senate. But the polling shows that more and more people are unhappy with immigration. They think it's out of control, and they're blaming Biden for it. And so Biden had to take action of some kind. He has to stem that tide on that issue.
Now, you worked for Moran, right?
I did, yeah.
So did you ever prep Moran for a committee meeting the way Marjorie Taylor Greene's staff prepares her?
Again,
they play with some Play-Doh, maybe some paper dowels.
No,
what a shit show! What a shit show!
Yeah, I have no words for that. Like, different world.
I mean, the House has always been filled with characters. There's 450 of them. It's
435.
There. Whatever. It's supposed to have those types of people there.
See, I think Craig, you're the reason why Trump is going to win.
No.
Here's why.
No.
Because you didn't pay attention in civics class. Because I think a lot of people don't understand how juries are selected, what they should have learned in their government class.
Oh,
I just don't understand.
Mike,
not to shift over to Trump now.
We cannot tackle the ignorance of the American public.
We don't have enough time to do that.
It's just not going to happen. So if you've been following this latest launch of the podcast, you know I'm extremely negative on Joe Biden.
Oh, I know you are.
And I
listen.
Do not think he's going to win. Yeah. I think he is going to lose. I think there's 5 months left to this election. The odds of him having a health incident in the next 5 months are 90-some%. An 82-year-old man working a physical schedule of a campaign is a recipe for disaster.
Well, he won't work that schedule.
He's going to have to work some schedule, isn't he? That's the other thing, too. He can't run a basement campaign. Yeah. He's going to have to get out there. He's going to have to perform in debates. He's going to actually have to run for president. And he just doesn't have the mental or the physical energy to do that anymore. And this is as obvious as the gigantic nose on my face to anybody paying attention. I don't think this is this is pretty straightforward.
Well, I would counter that because I think absolutely Biden can still win. The fact that we have 5 months left in the campaign is an eternity in politics. And number one, I think you have to recognize that both men are extremely unpopular. And so it's a matter of like people being concerned about the old guy and being senile and then concerned about the crazy guy. And so at the end of the day, does senile Trump crazy or does crazy Trump senile? And so a lot of that depends on the behavior of the candidates and how disciplined they are. We know one candidate is not disciplined at all, and I don't think will be disciplined under any reasonable measure going into November. And the fact is Biden can make headway by reminding voters that this is an unusual election because this is essentially an election of two incumbents. He needs to hammer the fact that Trump is also technically an incumbent. He was president just 4 years ago because incumbency is usually an advantage. It's not in this election. It hasn't been in several cycles. But if he can paint the scenario that Trump is also an incumbent, remind people of the Trump years, remind people of what happened in 2020, things were not rosy, not only because of the pandemic, but because of supply shortages and the fact people were working. It was chaos, and it lasted longer than it needed to because of dysfunction at the federal level. I think that's where he can make gains. And the fact of the matter is turnout will be lower this year because neither candidate is popular. And we're not going to see the surge we saw during the pandemic because of the ease of voting. But with less votes, Biden can still win based on a game of subtraction, whether or not there's less voters on Trump's side. And if you have Trump voters that are demoralized because of his conviction, because of other circumstances, and if they don't vote for Trump, some of those go towards RFK Jr., that still benefits Biden at the end to be able to win with less votes. And I say that because anecdotally I know a couple of people who supported Trump last time, one of whom has said they're going to do a write-in vote this time for a different Republican, the other is voting for RFK Jr. So again, you look at that, there can be a counter strategy that is parallel to Biden's get out the vote strategy to encourage those people to go third party.
And I think this is where you and I have a disagreement. I don't think Biden is capable of closing that gap. I don't think his energy level, his intellectual level, his presentation level is presidential. And I don't think there's any way Biden can close ground. 2 weeks ago, Bill Maher went on The View and said that Biden's appearance was cadaver-like. He's 100% spot on. Brandon, in politics, how do you raise your popularity if every single time your physical appearance appears, people have a negative reaction to it? I mean, that's the box that I see Biden in. What could Biden do to overcome the core problem he has that he's older than dirt? I just don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, some of that can't be overcome other than just, presence, I think, and not messing up, not slipping, not, giving an indication that he's having a mental lapse or that, he's having an issue. But
Mike just rolled his eyes when you said mental lapse.
Well, the only thing I can think of is he should go on the Tonight Show and play Return to Sender on a saxophone.
Mike,
that helped for both.
Mike, the Tonight Show has not been culturally relevant.
I know. I was just trying to think of how do you be hip, and I was The other day I was listening to listening to music, and Return to Sender came on, and I had this flashback moment remembering when Bill Clinton was on the Tonight Show and he played
his sax
on the saxophone, and everyone was like, "Wow, this guy is pretty cool."
Had the shades on,
played
a little Heartbreak
moment,
Hotel.
It was a big moment. So that's what.
What can Biden do?
I don't know.
that was also a different time and era.
Could Biden play a kazoo? That was just a joke. Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
well, the problem is that no one would know what Return to Sender is because it's such an old song.
I was going to take another swipe at you. But you played the Elvis version of it. Did you play, Mike, of Return to Sender?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm old school.
Brandon's just looking at us too, like, Jesus Christ, can we get to something in the last?
Wasn't that Arsenio Hall's show that he went on and played?
It was Arsenio Hall.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
But
was that where he did the saxophone, or was it the Tonight Show?
It was Arsenio Hall.
Arsenio Hall,
because Arsenio Hall was more culturally relevant, especially to black people, than the
Johnny
Tonight Show.
Carson.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was a difference between now and then, right? I mean, you had more people that watch live TV. Like today, our media environment is so bifurcated. You don't have, other than like the Super Bowl, you don't have a large volume of Americans watching something at exactly the same time to be able to make a judgment based on that without it being pre-recorded or then going through various media filters. I think the debate is the last opportunity to do that. There's declining viewership of debates, but that's really the only opportunity where you will have a substantial number of people watching it either online or, via cable TV, traditional means. That's the only time. But I will argue we also have to keep context, perspective. So the election, we can go through national numbers all day long, but really
it's going to matter. It's like 5 states that matter.
It's 6 states, 6 swing states, and
none
that's all that
none
matters.
of the other ones. Kansas doesn't matter. Missouri doesn't matter.
We're talking about
Oklahoma
like
doesn't matter.
150,000 votes between 6 states. That's what ultimately matters. And it's funny because I have friends in Europe who are like religiously following polls out of like Michigan and Arizona and paying attention to this, which is crazy to think of. But
I have a friend that recently quit his job and it's going to take like 6 months off. And I said, you really should move to Ohio and like do door knocking because that's the kind of stuff you should do over the next 6 months to try to make sure.
But not Ohio, because I don't think Ohio's.
Well, I'm just saying
Ohio's lost. I mean, on the presidential level, I think Sherrod Brown can retain it, but Ohio's been moving red rather quickly, kind of like in the Florida vein. But I mean, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania, any of those states. I mean, that's where it's really going to come down to get out the vote.
Go ahead.
Well, so what do you do? How do you make it? How do you make something change in those states?
I don't know. I mean, my theme is, Mike, if we started this because we were confused, nothing is cleared up. Yeah, nothing has gotten.
Well, I think
confusing.
It's gotten worse because it just the ability to defy gravity of Donald Trump is just absolutely remarkable to me.
Somehow, Donald,
absolutely remarkable.
He's not a real person. He's a caricature.
Nobody takes him seriously enough, so he can continue to say crazy, scary things, and people just go, "Oh."
Well, and I think about what Brandon just said. He's maneuvered himself to a point. He can say or do anything, and there are no repercussions for it. Not
even
politically, not nothing.
Especially not with this base. I mean, that's
to me that's the game.
And
how did that happen?
Well, so
how did we take this fat orange fuck and let him occupy this position that no politician in my lifetime has been able to maneuver to? How did that happen?
And he's not a soothsayer, so I don't want to give him that. But, I mean, he told us early on in the 2016 campaign that he could go shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and his people would still support him. I mean, he was right.
Well, how does he get away? So when he's doing the kind of softball interview with Fox News and they toss the lock her up thing, and he just says, "I never said that."
This is my example. He's a caricature. He's not a human, and people don't treat him as one.
Okay, and so this is the problem too with mainstream media, with the way they conduct interviews with Trump. And I'm not talking about the Fox News because they're not mainstream. But I'm talking about like the
I will
ABC
hear no
and
slander
others.
about my favorite news work. Damn it, that Fox News.
But they still follow traditional means of interviewing candidates, and you cannot do that with Trump because it is just an avalanche of lies and of basically and just avoiding topics, changing topics on a dime. You have to do. The only person I've seen in recent memory who could interview Trump well was Jonathan Swan during the pandemic, where he was fact checking him in real time, would cut him off, had like all these documents in hand and be actually, this is what you said here. And like, because most mainstream news media have this deference to the president, even when he's wrong, and they will only cut him off so many times. And so when he's given mainstream interviews, I find myself yelling because so many of his lies go unchallenged because they're so quickly disseminated, and the interviewer can't keep up. And you need somebody who can.
The problem isn't Trump. The problem is us. We created the environment that allowed Trump to come onto the stage. Again, I go back to, if the only thing I told you about this country is Trump was president, you would say, raise the upside down flag, shit's gone terrible,
they are
right?
doing that too.
Trump was ahead of the game in realizing how bad things had gotten, especially for certain populations of folks, how they feel disconnected from the economy, from the world, from the culture. He recognized that beforehand, and he created this bond with these people that allows him now to do whatever he wants, because these people are a vessel that they need something poured into, and Trump poured something into them: legitimacy, power. Which is what everybody craves.
And that's essentially what it is. So I'm beyond the point where I'm tired with these media like trying to understand Trump voter stories now, because I think what you just said, Craig, is really what it is. I mean, he harnessed that sense of grievance that many of these voters had and gave power and voice to it. And so it's about emotions. It's not about reality. And so we have to acknowledge that many of these voters live in an alternate reality. If you look at the polling, 49% of Americans think the unemployment rate is at its highest level in 50 years, when actually it's at some of the lowest levels in 50 years. You have something like almost 40% that think that the stock market is at an all-time low, which is the opposite of actually where the stock market is today. Like, these are fundamental facts. These are not debatable policy initiatives, right. But you have such large numbers of Americans who disagree. And so you have to be willing to call that out. I don't know what the answer is other than just hammering like, this is not fact. This is not reality. I mean, because it's bad enough that you have almost 60, 70% of Republicans that believe that Biden never won the 2020 election to this day.
Right.
Like, there's some fundamentals you can't argue with, but the problem is, like, we are kind of past the point where we can completely reverse. And so it's like, where do we go from here? We don't have a third party either that can kind of step in and be disinformation. This is truth. This is disinformation. And it's a free-for-all.
Trump's recognition of this condition in the United States, that's what I'll blame myself and people like me.
Do you think he? I mean, I don't really think he's that smart. I think he fell into this.
He has a lizard brain.
Yeah.
He sees basic things. He understands basic emotions, fear, anger, and he uses those in ways that normal people will not use them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I was talking about being a pathological liar. I mean, when I was watching that Fox News thing, it's like the kind of person that, like, if you ever said anything to any, be like, no, I didn't say that. Without even that's just like that's a lizard reaction. It's not like he didn't think that through and say, oh yeah, I've led the charge. He's just like,
he doesn't
I never
have
said
to.
that.
Yeah.
This is Will Cain, Pete Hegseth, and some other chick from Fox. There's no thinking involved here.
It was a joke.
He could have reached out and slapped one of them right in the face and said, do you like that? And the other two said, we love that shit. I mean, I know how we got here. I just don't understand the conditions of the country being this bad that allowed this to happen. We came out of the Obama president. I'm like, we're cool. We elected this hip black dude. I feel like I finished the job of the 60s.
Exactly.
I thought we are, this is it.
Chart is up and to the right.
Good.
Up and to the right.
We
up
are
and to the right.
headed in the right direction. Couldn't have been more wrong. And I've been wrong for 8 years after that. And the fact that another 70 million people are going to vote for this guy is more evidence of that. I don't think we can come up with any solutions yet, because I still don't think we've diagnosed what the problem is. And I still don't think we understand the problem at scale. And what gives me this unique perspective is my immersion into Fox News.
It's funny. I took your advice and I've tried to watch it. and I mean, I literally can hang on for about 20 seconds and then I'm out. Like, I just like, you guys just like, I cannot stand it.
If you're going to make any serious attempt at understanding this half of the country that is devoted to this man, you got to watch an equal part of Fox News.
Is this like the red pill?
I'm just saying, if you want to understand what these people drape themselves in every day, This is it.
Fox News had a whole segment the other week, actually, after Trump's conviction, after they briefly spoke about it, on Taco Bell changing their menu. I mean, that elicited an entire segment on Fox News.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching that night. There was some kid that I can't remember. It was some school thing, and I was like, Trump just got indicted. I mean, I thought, oh, I'm gonna surf the channels to see what everyone's talking about because Trump, got not indicted, but he got convicted of 34 counts. And I'm like, okay, I flip over to Fox, and it's some young kid talking about how he does like freedom of speech thing in his school or something like that. And I'm like, it was like, what planet are you people on?
Let's talk about Trump's court cases for a minute, because I think the New York case is going to get kicked out on appeal. Brandon and I have talked about this. I've done feverishly Googling this week. I can come up with there's no indication that this has ever been done. What had been done is they take a state crime, say a federal crime was committed, but they never charged the federal.
Well, the intent
crime.
was there to commit the federal crime.
Correct, but this is the only, and New York is the only state that the law is written that way, and it's the only time they've charged the state crime and not charged the federal. Not only not charged it, not named it. As an American, I don't like any of it. I hate Trump, but this is like Bill Cosby walking away because the DA lied to him about his confession. This almost has to be overturned. I just don't see how you can say this becomes a felony because of this federal crime, which we're not going to charge you with and we're not going to specifically name. I just don't. I don't. How does this work?
Hey, Brendan, I think he's watching too much Fox News.
No, I'll ask it to you this way, Mike. If it were you, do you think that was fair? If you were charged with a felony and this was the setup, would you think, oh, well, that's just the way the system works, I guess?
The thing is, what I don't understand about this whole thing is I just don't think everyday Americans do the math on how I'm going to purposely lie about cook my books.
Sure.
Figure out that I'm going to pay somebody for this and have them pay for that, and make it so there's no paper trail to cover up an affair I'm having. Like Americans, I don't think normal people think about these.
That's not the message.
Think about this thing.
That's not the message. The message is, look what these powerful people in New York are doing to somebody.
I get
and
it.
Guess what? They can do it. Do you think if they wanted something from you, they couldn't cobble together?
This to you too.
They couldn't stitch together two things.
I'm not if the NSA is listening right now.
If we took a walk through your campaign finances,
I think in today's world, I think any of us could be accused of a crime, and it would be. And if someone really wanted to put you away, they could do it.
It's not anyone.
Anywhere.
It's the government.
Well, that's
the deep state.
That has the legal. One of the ways to define government is the only legal entity in the United States authorized to use power to get their way, right?
Right.
But let's be honest. What they are painting to their followers and what their followers, the mantra they're adopting is, it's not just this rogue prosecutor. This is Biden. Biden is directing this from the White House. He's going after his political opponent. That's the message.
And I have no sympathy for Trump in this anyway. I mean, he deserves everything the court gets him. Yeah. He's abused the court system for years.
No, he's just
sued. And piss on him. If he gets it, I don't care. But the preservation of the legal system is important.
But at the same time, I have zero confidence that he will ever pay for any crime that he's committed. Crime.
He won't.
He never will. Because to be cynical about wealth in this country, if you have enough money, you can drag it out for as long as possible.
Sure.
And he could drag it out all the way to his deathbed and never paid, and then it's gone.
Trump's showing you what you can do with B-level legal talent.
C level.
D level. He's certainly not getting anybody worth their salt because it's not going to happen.
There is, this has started to show up in some of the early polling. It's kind of interesting. So there's an ABC News Ipsos poll that found 49% of Americans want Trump to end his campaign after the conviction now. That includes 52% of independents and 67% of so-called double haters, those that hate Trump and hate Biden.
I just thought that I double hated Trump.
No. And then Morning Consult found 54% of voters approve of the verdict. 49% think he should be sentenced to probation. 49% of independents think he should drop out. 15% of likely Republican voters think he should drop out. So it's interesting. So I think at the end of the day, this is going to impact the margins, but the margins is where this race is going to be. So if you're talking at a state level and you're talking about tens of thousands of votes, that can make a difference if there's sway there.
Mike, do you believe there are any persuadable voters in this election?
I would hope that there are. I have to be. I just because I want to be an optimist that like people. I mean, the thing is everyone voted the last time, so they're not like these are new candidates. We're not.
This is his third election he's in.
Yeah, it's not. Well, I mean, it's
Biden's been in the federal government for 50 years.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know.
I think this is another disagreement Brandon and I have. I don't think anybody is persuadable. Everybody is locked in. It's all about who's going to vote and who's not going to vote.
Well, I agree with that.
All turnout.
To get out the vote, like Brandon said earlier, that is the key. So we just have to hope for lots of snow in the Midwest that day. Would probably be our best deal.
Well, and the thing is, and Craig and I were talking about this last time. So there's been a paradigm shift. It used to be, and I think you're working us going back decades, Democrats relied on expanded voter turnout, like among low information voters, voters that turn out regularly. That's been flipped now. So Democrats thrive in reduced turnout scenarios like we see in midterms, not so much in presidential races.
How do you keep the diehard Trump voters from showing up and voting on Election Day, besides a weather event?
I think that, part of it is, I think blurring the lines between whether or not a Trump or vote for Trump is going to be effective and giving them an alternative, somebody like an RFK Jr., because those low information voters are, some of them in some of these surveys, they lean towards Trump just based on these general feelings of like, oh, economy was better under him. Like, I don't know, Biden's too old. But they're not committed to where they say he has their vote on Election Day. And so I think, again, if I was Machiavellian, I would I would have like a apparatus that was very far removed from the Biden campaign, but one that was very much...
I mean, maybe in Russia or China.
Right. Making a ploy towards cynicism, saying, why get out and vote for Trump? It's not going to make a difference. At the end of the day, they're all the same. These are politicians. Because at their core, a lot of these people have this very jaded view, like all the politicians are the same, the parties are the same, it's a uniparty. They've always thought that Trump is outside of that. But if you can somehow like just tweak it so like, well, Trump may have been outside of that before, but he's now part of it. Like he's just like them. That's what RFK Jr. is trying to do that to a degree by hammering Trump on his support for like the COVID vaccines, because a lot of Trump's base doesn't support vaccination. I mean, there's items like that would cause people to maybe stay home who don't turn out regularly.
Let me ask this question. What groups does Trump increase his voter percentage in? Because the last time he ran for president, he increased it with women, Latinos, African-American men. If that trend line continues...
I don't see with women this time after the Dobbs
decision. Won women in 2016.
Yeah.
In 2016 and 2020.
Well,
the man won a majority of college-educated women. If any of you can explain that to me, I will shut up and never talk on a microphone again.
I can't explain that, but I do think Dobbs was
True. He's got some headwinds this time.
Paradigm shift. And so I think, as we've seen in the elections, in some of the states like Arizona that are going to have an abortion measure on the ballot, like that can impact Biden's vote.
Well, Biden got 9% of the black vote. If he gets 20, this race is over. It's done.
Yeah. Well, I agree. 20 in those key states.
Yeah.
If he gets 20 in states that matter.
Based out of Philadelphia and Atlanta,
right.
He's done. He has the easiest path to the presidency, without a doubt. Much easier than Biden.
But Trump also has a penchant for being his own worst enemy and harming himself. And so I think that just by virtue of his diarrhea of the mouth.
Does he? How? All of the stuff that he did from 2016 to 2020, he got more votes than any sitting president ever gotten. Then he basically launched a soft coup, and they rewarded him for that by taking over the party. So I don't see any real.
But he did lose by the largest amount at the popular vote level of any incumbent since Herbert Hoover in 1928.
Sure. He also got 71 million votes, which was more than any sitting president ever.
Well, I mean, that's those statistics. I rely on the percentages more than the gross numbers, just because the country has more people. So I mean,
but in Trump's lizard brain, those 2 points connect to, well, I didn't lose.
Oh, I agree.
I know he hammers that all the time, but
I
that's
got
not
more votes, so therefore I won. It doesn't matter if the other guy that doesn't equate. That doesn't follow what Trump wants. So, yeah, I have not yet seen any evidence that Biden can close even this smallest gap with Trump. And the only thing that will clip Trump is Trump himself, which there's a high likelihood of that, and that the Democrats have a much more better ground game, and they were used to chasing votes, and we just go about this in a different way.
The Democrats need to definitely have a better ground game, and I am terrified beyond belief because I don't think we can understate the impact of foreign propaganda in this election cycle with Russia and China.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. You know, I remember having a conversation with my son, who's a software engineer, about how, you know, generative AI and how you could, you can really come up with some pretty crazy scenarios of basically flooding, you know, social media channels with just all kinds of stuff, and it'd be entirely automated.
Easily.
It's terrifying.
Did either of you see the New York Times article on this former Palm Beach County, Florida sheriff's deputy who was given asylum in Russia and
I
now
saw that article you sent me. It's crazy.
He runs this media farm with all these fake news sites. Like one is called DC List. It's like the Philadelphia Times. Like, and they sound legit, and you go to the websites and they have stories on them. All come from the same server in Russia. There's dozens of them, and they all just churn out Russian propaganda pieces. They question the war on Ukraine. They criticize Biden. They rely on conspiracy. Now, from an aesthetic viewpoint, they look like they could be, you know, smaller newspapers in these cities, but they're not. And so he is running these operations using Kremlin money. And he was also on the run from the law. Like, he was indicted and charged with numerous things and sexual assault from his time as an officer. But
are we talking about Trump or this guy?
I know it's hard to tell this guy, but that's what's scary. And I saw the names of some of the, you know, so-called media outlets in this list, and I've seen them online. I've seen them shared on Twitter X. I've seen them in other places. Like, you know, and people are just consuming these as actual news, and they're not. And that's not even AI. AI is a completely different facet of it. Because what do you do when you get a video of Biden that's clearly doctored, or may, you know, be clearly doctored upon further inspection, but it, you know, just initial, you know, is not. And
superficial, low res while you're on Facebook.
So the White House,
stoplight.
White House said they would not give up the her tapes because they were afraid of AI doctoring.
Yeah.
That's horseshit. I'm sorry. That's bullshit. Those are public records. You have no right to do that.
Right.
We're going to start using AI as an excuse not to release information now? That seems very odd to me.
But we also, and this is where technology is way ahead of the law, we have no guardrails for AI as it exists, like within the political system, the legal system. Like, we're still trying to catch up.
Well, see, to me, AI is not the problem. It's just the mechanism by which we share information is the problem, because the speed in which data can be, you know, like some kook could sit, you know, 200 years ago could sit in the basement with a printing press and print anything that they want.
Right.
But the likelihood of a lot of people seeing it was very low.
Yeah.
Whereas now the velocity of news is like instantaneous. And if it gets one hit on, you know, Newsmax, then like 3 million people see it, and then you can't put
by
that
the time
back
you're
in
trying
the
to
box.
refute it, yes, it's too late.
You can't put it back in the box.
The problem isn't the technology, it's the business model they laid on top of it. I mean, you probably know the year of this maybe more than I do, but I think it was 2004, 2005, when they passed the law that, they can just steal any information they want from you online. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Was there ever a debate about that? Did anybody ever really get involved in thinking through a little bit?
You know, in the early days of Facebook, it was a totally different world.
I don't think the problem is the technology. The problem is the business model that incentivizes all of this bullshit. Well, starting with the theft of all of your data.
But it's also the law, the DCMA, the Digital Copyright Millennium Act. When was the last time that was updated? I think it was 1998. We're like, you know.
Why is it that every social media site you hit, I open Instagram, and every 6 months it pops up, hey, do you still want to participate in all this data advertising bullshit? Yes or no? No? Okay. We will take that away from you. Now, your experience may be a little bit different, but you can choose to opt out. Isn't that more of a European style approach? That
you're thinking of the GDPR.
You're
thinking of the
consent.
GDPR.
Yeah.
So it's not to that level, but they do recognize at least this data is yours, and you have some rights to it.
I think that, I don't know. I can't speak for how the people that work at Facebook, but they have a high incentive to monetize your data because that is their business.
That's where they make their money.
I'm just hoping AI.
Well, I know. So I decided I was like for Father's Day, my wife Jody said, "Hey, why don't we? You've been asking for a desk, adjustable
Right desk.
Yeah.
What do they call it? Adjustable desk.
Adjustable desk.
So I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So I go on, Facebook Marketplace, click around. Okay, how much do they roughly cost? Go to IKEA's website. Okay, how much? Okay, and that's it. And then like I have been relentlessly getting ads like everywhere about standing desks.
Do you remember the debate?
And I'm like,
we had over that?
I know that this works this way, but it's so.
Can you recall when the Senate, the most deliberate
profane.
body on earth, had a 5-month debate on what? I must have missed all of that shit. I am waiting. God, please let AI wipe out 75% of jobs in the next 5 years. Yeah. What we need to take a huge turn forward as a civilization is we need to completely level set the economy. The world of work has gotten completely out of hand. It dominates our lives. It's hurting us physically. It's hurting us mentally. We're come to a point. We still live under the rules of it's 1850. Why? Because Harry Ford 100 years ago, you need 5 days to work, 1 day for your house, and 1 day for God. We still live off that?
Well, I think it's
That's stupid.
I think isn't it also legal to have an abortion in Arizona like in 1850?
I don't think Harry Ford talked about abortions. Right?
1854.
But my point is we are running off such old norms and rules.
Oh, yeah.
Something, and this is where I was hoping the pandemic would do it. Something's going to have to force our hand to change, and now I hope it's AI.
Well, look, it was crazy. I mean, the pandemic is what forced like remote work. I mean, it's crazy that it takes something like that to change even just how we work and where. But I mean, we're slow to change those types of things.
Why are we working these many hours? For what purpose are we doing? I mean, all this technology you have layered on you. Have you changed your work routine in any way? No. It's mostly about bullshitting with people.
It's a whole do more with less.
Yeah, it's dumb. It's dumb. Wipe the slate clean. Let's start over. That's what I'd like to see happen.
And I could go down a whole rabbit hole because I don't. The start of my career, I was never in so many meetings, and I am just like it's meeting overload. Like let's have a meeting, talk about the meeting. Let's throw a reoccurring 30-minute meeting here and one here, and it's like we're not doing anything. We're talking a lot, and then we spend more of our time talking than doing because I guess some people have to fill time that way. But there's also a whole methodology there. Needs to
change. The 20 years I worked in tech, our doing to talking ratio, by the time it's all talk. Because you'll go to work for a company that's making a new piece of software. What's the goal of this? Sell it? No. Should we get customers? Nah. We're just trying to attract some VC money. Then after that, we're just looking to sell. There's nobody's looking to make the next IBM. No one's looking for it's all just how quickly
all incremental.
Can we do something to cash out?
And changes we see. Yeah.
The world of tech sucks too. It needs to be completely thrown out and just reimagined.
You're quite the cynic today. Every day.
I've spent like a year and a half retired. This is the only way human beings were supposed to live. The idea that you get up and drag, it's totally ridiculous. And it's totally unnecessary.
See,
we don't need it.
I enjoy my work. And I get up, I start the day early usually. I usually work in the evening times. I enjoy it.
Could you make your own schedule every day and be happy?
Well, I actually kind of do.
There you go.
So, I mean, it kind of almost works. I mean, I have some meetings and such, some things I don't like to do, but I understand I have to be a grown up, and there's some things during the day they still pay me every 2 weeks. So like, I'm going to do some things I don't really like to do, but the rest of the time I have quite a bit of flexibility because I work from home. I mean, it's a pretty good deal. Maybe you're just in the wrong job.
Mike, you're 60?
I'm over 60.
Okay. We'll just say 60.
I'm spoiled.
How is working when you get close to retirement age, let's say? How does work change the older you stay in it?
Well, I think that you don't care as much about what other people think.
Sure.
You basically, at least for me, I tell people what I think most of the time. I'm also I don't know, I'm both at the same one time more impatient and sometimes less impatient with things. And actually right now, the hardest thing I think for my work is just navigating the workplace and kind of how, the culture of the workplace today. As an older white man, I have a staffer that came into a meeting one time, and we were talking, and I said, I really want us to have the door open. I don't want I feel very uncomfortable the door is closed to this meeting because no one can see in the meeting. And I don't want to be ever in a situation where anyone could accuse of something happening. Or I was actually in a meeting at another opportunity
if you don't
where
mind.
all the people in the room were women except for me. And then they said something, that I would have been a trigger if I would have said, the opposite of that. So I kind of called them out on it.
So what would you have done if I'm assuming it was a young woman in this meeting?
Yeah.
You would have said, well, you don't trust me. You don't see me as an adult and you don't trust me. That's why you have to have that door open. And if you're my boss, what that means is I don't trust you to ever promote me or work with me.
I tell you, that to me, being accused of doing something awful to somebody else is my greatest fear at work. And so I guard against it pretty religiously.
Yeah. I guess that's a horrible experience, isn't it?
But I think it's just the nature of the world we're in.
But so you're telling me the world of work has deteriorated so much. I can't have a woman that works for me come in and have a closed door conversation.
I listened to a podcast today. It was really interesting.
But wait, hold on. Let me ask it this way. The guy comes in, he gets that, right? He gets the door closed, right? You close the door with him.
I would not feel as uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So a tough conversation with a man. There's different rules.
I'm going to get the specifics of this wrong, but I listened to a podcast the other day, and it was a study about how the Me Too revolution is actually hurting collaboration between people of different sexes.
Of course it is. Sure.
And it was a study of for professors, like when you do a research project, how you have like a junior researcher and how they select, it's a natural selection process. And they're able to show that from the Me Too moment on, like fewer men were getting younger PhD women students to work on their things for fear of this problem. And actually,
if you change the incentive structure, you get different
that may have
results.
Triggered it in my mind. Okay, well, maybe
Sure.
I should be worried about this a little bit. Nothing would ever happen, but maybe I should be worried about this too.
I'm just thinking that anybody that's ever worked for me, it always came down to, do I trust you? Can you trust me? When I ask you to do something that maybe you don't know what it's for, you have to trust me that it's okay, that you should be doing this. And I don't see it work how you form those type of relationships when you can't close a door with someone.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. That's why work sucks. This is part of what needs to be blown up and totally rethought.
There was another podcast I listened to that was related to a topic we were just talking about. I don't know how we're doing on time, by the way.
We're fine, Mike. We're fine. We have no time limit here.
Okay.
You can talk as much as you'd like.
Well, I don't know how many people want to listen to it all, but no, I was listening to a podcast just 2 days ago. Actually, it was Andrew Yang's Forward, and there's a guy that's running a nonprofit that's trying to bring back local press. And he was making, I was like completing sentences for this guy. Because one of the things I said during the campaign was that in today's world, the Kansas City Star can't afford to send a beat writer to D.C. and follow everyone around from from our congressional leadership and our senators and stuff, because it doesn't make economic sense.
They can't even do that locally.
Exactly. So, the point is that, over the last 20 years, you've had it's like 30% of all the newspapers have failed, and all these people don't have jobs, and most of the ones that are still here are all hollowed out. They call them ghost newspapers.
And flip from the other side, if I'm a congressman, why would I talk to the Kansas City Star?
Well, there's no reason.
Anything I want to get off, I'll put out through my Twitter or my own social channels. And I've got a whole ecosystem of friendly media.
And you've got the party kind of making you go to the right places and all that kind of stuff. But his point about starting this nonprofit was trying to find ways to build an economy back for local newspapers, because his argument, which I think is true, is that local papers created a channel where there's a sense of community, of you and your neighbors together, and today there isn't that. It's all about the polarization national media, which is not incentivized to actually make everyone in a cohesive town work together, but it's really about it's us versus them, because that's how they make their money.
So many local municipalities and counties now operate as news deserts, essentially, because there is no news coverage of what's happening at those levels.
Well, they even told a story about how, like, the city council, like the local beat reporter would show up at city council meetings, and like as soon as that person stopped coming, like the behavior just got out of control because there was no one watching,
no oversight, no accountability.
Exactly.
Well, and we have seen some successful models of that. Like for those of us like here locally, Johnson County Post used to be Shawnee Mission Post. Like that sprang up, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, around that time frame, and they've expanded their local coverage. I mean, they cover local issues that wouldn't get covered anywhere else.
Right. When I sat down with them during the campaign, and the reporter I talked to was excellent. So, I mean, I know it's good. But anyway, the point is that it goes back to how do we solve this problem? How do we, and I think it's part of the problem is, again, we've got everyone in their own camps. They got their own media, and like, there's no common truth. There's no common moments where
Mike,
we all come together.
If you wanted to get the Kansas City Star delivered to you every day and on Sunday, how much does that cost a year?
This is good.
I don't even know.
Take a guess. Take a guess.
Well, like over the course of a year, I don't know, $200.
$1,500.
Oh, shit.
That's how much it is now. Yeah.
I know this because I was at my mother-in-law's a couple of weeks ago, and hear my wife all of a sudden say, "What the hell is this?" It's a $750 bill from the Star, to which my mother-in-law says, "That's my 6-month bill." So I guess so I tell that story because I think as you get older, you could agree there's sometimes you want to conserve things, or sometimes you want to destroy things. You go in cycles. I'm in a big destroy
Yeah,
things.
you are.
The market has destroyed newspapers.
It has.
And it destroyed them for a reason. And technology has screamed past them in a way there is zero opportunity for them to make up. So instead of this intelligent young man going out and raising a bunch of goddamn money to do nothing, why aren't we working on what's the next best thing? People like that piss me off because he's going to go out and spend a bunch of time and a bunch of cycles and a bunch of bullshit over something that Andrew Yang and this guy are smart enough to know no numbers work here. This doesn't work. Where would you even get a printer printer?
No,
printed
no,
anymore?
I don't. I think the point of the podcast was about bringing back local media,
Not necessarily
and coverage.
print media,
not
but,
print media.
yeah.
I get that, but how?
Well, I mean, I
It's made
don't
it's
remember.
pivot.
I listened
It's
to the podcast.
not going to pivot back.
But you have to have an incentive because right now what qualifies as media, like on social networks, like there's no oversight or accountability for what they print. And, you know, typically with local mainstream news organizations, they're going to be held to a higher standard that doesn't exist online. And, you know,
And by the way, the thing about it, like if you're the Kansas City Star and you write an article, I mean, just as an example, you know, you have to remember you've got readers on both sides of the aisle, so you have to kind of run it down the middle a little bit more. Whereas when you have the current environment, you know, Newsmax does not have to worry about running down the middle. They
or
can
the
run
Blaze.
down,
Yeah.
or
This is what
anyone
I'm
on
saying.
both sides.
I don't know
and
what new
Newsmax over
local.
there.
Okay, so when you guys were growing up and we were growing up, every article that you read in the Kansas City Star and every article I read in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch passed through an editor,
Absolutely.
a professional who made sure. Are there any what website has an editor?
Well, I'm sure they have people making sure that they're not making mistakes.
Are you
now, by the way,
sure?
when I was a kid, you know, this is how old I am. When I was a kid living in Wichita, Kansas, in middle school, the buddy down the street delivered both the Wichita Eagle and the Wichita Beacon because there was a morning
There
and
were
an
two-
afternoon
oh,
paper.
gee, in Wichita.
And the only reason why you want to get the Beacon when I was a kid is so that way you could look at the scores from Sunday's football games that happened
yeah.
too late on the West Coast that they didn't show up in the Eagle on Monday
Hey,
morning.
Mike, you ever tell your kids there used to be a phone number you could call just to figure out the time and the temperature?
I didn't think
They
about
just look
that.
at you like you're an idiot. Like, what?
Yeah, there was.
It was 35 cents a call. Oh, my God. My mom
was
beat our
this?
ass the month.
Really?
Oh,
You had
yeah.
to pay
Ours
for
was
that?
35 cents a call, I think.
Was that like long distance or something?
I don't know. But the number we were calling must have been the wrong one.
Yeah, it was time and temp there for a while too.
But my point is that let's say a bunch of local media popped up. It would just
Well,
be a bunch of
no, I-
opinion, local, no editing, no nothing.
The point,
because the business
the point
model
of the story
dictates
is
it.
that you know the media landscape has changed and it's devolved into something that's not good. Maybe there's another way to bring back a sense of community where people are talking in a more balanced way.
So the social fabric of the United States, church was always the big one that.
Well, when you
wove
think about
it
that,
together.
that's under siege as well.
I grew up in the church. My mom was the secretary of the Catholic Church. Went to church before school. Father Deneen was our house every Sunday. Blah blah blah. You grew up, I think, in a Catholic tradition,
no,
or
I'm Protestant, so Methodist and Presbyterian.
And you went to a Christian Catholic school and
For college, yeah. But
So
I grew up Catholic,
We're
yeah.
all
Did you go to
religious
Benedictine?
aware.
No, I went to Creighton, but yeah,
Okay,
I was not a Benedict.
Did you listen to our Harrison Buckner thing?
You know, I don't. Maybe I didn't. I may have missed it. But
I like when Jason Sudeikis told Travis Kelce, you need to marry that
I was-
Taylor
I was-
Swift
I
gal.
was at the
She
beach.
don't need to work, and your kicker agrees with me.
well, they also had the other joke where George Wendt said, you know, happy LGBTQ plus month, or as your kicker would call it, June.
jeez. But, I mean, we used to do things. We used to bowling leagues. We used to go to church together.
The member-based associations, the Rotary Club, Kiwanis, Lions International.
None of that's anymore.
None of those like groups and organized associations, like they're all declining in membership. They're barely staying alive.
I was taking our dog for a walk the other night. I was enjoying Missouri's loose marijuana laws. And I got to thinking that we're in the third iteration of a neighborhood. The first one was in the house we lived at on Hickory Street with the Fanazzos and all those neighbors that we loved and partied and grew up and just loved those people. Then we moved to Platte City, and we had another community with John and Dana and the Sollys, and we're going to Europe with John and Dana. And we really love those people and their part. And now I don't know any of my neighbors' names. I don't know who they are. I don't make any effort to talk to them. I will physically run away if I see you. That's how much it's changed from in the last 30 years. Neighbors are a nuisance. They're a pain in the ass, and they're people I do not want to know. Because I figured if I get to know you, then I might have to do something for you, or you might want to talk to me or something. And I just don't feel that's gone. And it's not just me. No, our whole neighborhood is like that. I mean, we wave. We're very friendly. We're very polite. Hello, how are you doing? But to know you and to get involved with your life, oh, there's no way. That's not happening anymore. What brings that back? Well, one, do you guys feel the same way, or is it just me I'm getting old and just being a bigger a-hole than I normally am? But
I think about this in Johnson County a lot because we've bounced around, and I think there's actually a very high correlation in Johnson County, Kansas, as to how far north you live and how the energy level of the neighborhoods. So as you move further south, it's more younger families and starter families.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you stayed at 127th Street for the last 30 years, you are the old people on the block because because you were there 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But if you move out to a place 30 years ago that was a field, it's mostly a lot more newer families. And so I've seen as we've kind of moved between. Well, we lived up here. Actually, we lived in Roseville Springs Apartments. The first one when I first got married, right across the street over there on 87th Street, and our first house was 127th. And then we moved out. We moved away, came back, and we moved out 135th, and then we were on 151st, 159th, 167th, and now we're 127th, moving back in. And you can really see the differences north and south and Overland Park and Johnson County. And you can also see it in the voting too. Much more conservative, and when you go out, but it's actually that's kind of the inverse of that.
Do you know any of your neighbors?
Oh yeah, well, our neighborhood, yes.
Okay.
Because in our neighborhood, it's a maintenance provided neighborhood, which means basically in Johnson County, the only people that live there are over the age of 70. So because most people do not buy homes that are.
Is it 55 families. Plus by rule?
No, it's not.
Okay, gotcha.
It's just
just the old,
just by nature.
Gotcha.
And I mean, everyone in that neighborhood. I mean, I think there's like 3 families that have people under the age of 65, and all the rest of them are retired. All the rest of them are home all the time. And I walk the dog, and I mean, I cannot walk around around the block without seeing 4 or 5 people that I personally know. I know their name. I know their dog's name because I see them 4 times a day when I walk the dog because they don't go to work. And I work from home.
Jody and I were forced to look at each other in the eye the other night and admit that if we ever did buy a second home in retirement, it would only be in a 55 and up neighborhood. Because young people, there's no way.
I know that this is going to sound really...
Bunch of cars, loud music, no.
Well, this is, I mean, there's one small benefit you don't think about living in a maintenance-provided community that I think is one of the nicest things about it, is that the people that come in and mow all the yards on Thursday.
So it looks real nice.
So but no. Here's the best part. That means the other 6 days of the week, no one is mowing their yard.
Okay.
So you walk through the neighborhood on a Tuesday afternoon, no mowers. You don't hear any mowers.
That.
Whereas you live out in any other neighborhood where it's not all maintenance provided, there is always somebody mowing the yard. Yeah. Every evening, every night, every afternoon, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Whereas here it's like okay, Thursday we got to get through the afternoon of the mowers, and then once they're gone, you don't hear them again until the next Thursday.
I alone would move to a maintenance provided neighborhood just for that reason. But I'm kind of the same. So like 20 years ago, I knew some of my neighbors in the neighborhood just by virtue of I got involved with the HOA. I felt like there was just more openness then. Back then there were like block parties and picnics. There are today in my neighborhood. And so I only know a handful of neighbors that are still there from that time, but I don't know any of the new people. I've had people that are new and have come and gone who it's been the same thing. I've waved at them, but I don't really know their names.
I do think some of this is happening because I know that at least in our neighborhood, so we moved in like And then the pandemic hit. So we didn't really get to know many people. And then we ended up getting our dog during the pandemic. So it's kind of reintroduced us to the neighbors. And we've been there for about 4 years now. But what's interesting that I found out is that our neighborhood used to have a lot of those more social things. And then when Trump got elected and that whole thing went down, it fractured into two groups. And so there's the Democrat dads and then there's the Republican dads. And they don't intermingle because they were having fights about stuff all the time. And I think that what's happened is people are just like, is it really worth the effort to take the chance?
Well, the worst case scenario could be what you have with like Justice Alito in his neighborhood, right? I mean, that's like worst case scenario with their neighbors.
She spit. They called her the C word. She spit on them.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell?
And that's in an affluent
the
DC
Supreme
suburb,
Court judge can't have two young people next to you arrested or shot. I mean, that's what I would. I'm a Supreme Court judge, for Christ's sakes. You call my wife the C word, the state police are coming, aren't they? The FBI, the DOJ. What's the use of being a federal judge if you can't abuse it?
Exactly.
We're just far less neighborly. We're far less connected, and I don't think there's any way we can. I just don't see what puts it back together.
Well, I think the thing is that when you do come together in community, you are forced at times to have empathy for people that you may disagree with on other things, and I saw that during the campaign. You do go and meet with people that you don't agree with on stuff, and as you begin to build a relationship, you begin to say, okay, wait, we have some things in common, and actually we're not that different. But the problem is we don't have those opportunities anymore. There was a story I told during the campaign many times. One of the things I did during the campaign is I went out and I met with as many leaders in the district as I could. And the first person I met with, as I called the Archdiocese of Kansas City, Kansas, and I wanted to go meet with the person that runs the abortion, conversation there. And so I met with that person and, very lovely, I can't remember her name, lovely person, gave me the whole pitch on, why this is terrible and why we should not allow women choice and all this kind of stuff, and totally got it. And after 45 minutes, meeting's ending, and I said, I completely appreciate your position. I don't agree with you. I think there's some other things you should consider. I said, but the next time I come, I'm going to talk about the 10 things that we agree on.
Yeah.
Like we agree on the fact that, people should have health care. Like immigrants should not be taken away in the middle of the night. And the thing is so crazy. We don't have those collisions, if you will,
right,
where people find, oh, hey, we like the same coffee. Let's talk about that. We just basically walk in because, we listen to the MAGA podcast.
Well, and partially because where people get their news now, the monetization element is in highlighting the differences, highlighting where you just diverge. So that's the essential problem.
I think you disagreed with me when I said we just need to go back to Walter Cronkite. Screw all this shit. Everything falls away. Well, it's 30 minutes, one night, world news, one channel, one person. That's it. No other news allowed.
I disagree with that only because I feel like there were a lot of stories that were not told because of Walter Cronkite's position in society.
Sure. He got to choose what he wanted,
and so,
when he wanted, how he
did
wanted.
Not, show the plight of immigrant workers in California.
That is a negative.
Right.
Now, let's stack up the negatives that we have today. Don't know who these news people are. Lack of editing. Most of this is a business model. 2/3 of this is fake shit.
People operate in ideological silos.
Correct.
They have their own reality-based
one of the worst things that's ever
systems.
happened, I think, to our fabric is when the mainstream media got broken up or failed to exist in its state that it was when I was a kid.
Right.
The fracturing of the media, the lack of or the rise of opinion media, all editors gone off websites. Everything's opinion now. That's where the money's at.
Right.
The only way to change that is make money in news. And I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
And all of these current people, especially on social media, that are supposedly, quote unquote, creating news. I mean, it's all cosplay, and it's all, in pursuit of enhancing their own profiles, monetizing their brands, their personal brands. And so that's the gameplay for most of them. And that's the difference versus what we had years ago.
Mike, since we're at the longest podcast we've ever done, it's time to wrap up because I know how sensitive you are to time.
No, I'm fine.
In the early days, if we went a minute over 30,
I was watching
Mike was like, "Oh, we got it. That's it. We
over
gotta
30?
Go." Oh, yeah.
Because we do an hour.
We do an hour.
Yeah. I know.
It's a standard. Let's end with this. What's going to happen? The election, if Biden or Trump wins, what is the reaction of the country if Trump wins, do we see mass protests? What happens if Biden wins? What happens to the MAGA? If we sit here November 6th? What are we looking like?
Brandon, you go first.
I'm very cynical on this because I think, regardless of what happens, you are going to have half of the country that will not be able to grapple, I think, in relatively normal ways with the outcome. So if Trump loses, like the other side will say the election's stolen, I think you can have periodic and sporadic outbursts of violence. I think that you will have, I think it's difficult to predict the reaction right now because I think even over the next 5 months, it's going to become much more combustible in terms of the threats and in terms of the innuendo and in terms of the incitement to violence. Mm-hmm. So that's what worries me most. But if you have basically the system breaks down and you start to see, I really worry about how our representatives in Congress channel their constituents' anger and reaction into doing things that are unlawful beyond of what they tried to do with not certifying the last presidential election.
Hey, we live in Kansas. He's the one in Missouri with Josh Hawley, so it's not our problem.
God, Hawley. That little skinny jean dickhead. God, I hate that guy.
So annoying.
What gets me about Hawley is he's so easy to see coming, and we just let him do it over and over again.
Well, the thing, this is a really cynical point of view that I'm going to share, and I would hate for this to be cut out and taken out of context because it's really bad. But I think the country is better off if Trump wins. Only because
I agree.
Only because the Democrats will they will protest. They'll be pissed. Colbert will have, they'll have outlets to get back at that whole thing. But if Trump loses, I'm terrified of the potential violence that may happen. I think that it could be really, really bad.
Well, I'm there with you, but I think also that there's a political lens there. And I am terrified if Trump does win, like the chaos of that. Like I can't even fathom. And again, one of my overarching concerns is foreign policy and what happens with NATO and our allies. And the fact that we have European allies right now that are trying to prepare for a Trump term and trying to have contingency plans in place because they are afraid and they are as cynical as we are talking right now because these leaders are talking about the fact that we're going to have to just assume we can't rely on the U.S. for anything, that they're not going to be a trustworthy partner. They're also talking about taking basically NATO in-house and operating completely outside of U.S. involvement. The fact that all of this is happening right now, just speaks to the expected dysfunction.
So what's your view, Craig?
I agree with you that if Trump loses, I don't think that 50% of the country is going to be able to accept that. Yeah. Losing 2 times to somebody that basically they've spent 4 years telling you is dead is just not going to fly. Yeah. And this whole rigged narrative, it's the whole Republican Party's narrative. It's half of the country's narrative.
And it's for everything. It's not just for the elections.
Correct.
It's for
everything is rigged.
The justice system is rigged. The only thing elections are rigged.
The only thing I would push back on is anytime anything bad happens to Trump, he says, well, I hope nobody goes out and does anything. And nobody ever goes out and does anything.
Yeah. And
the other thing to remember about Trump, he's like 0 for 23 since he's been out of office. He's lost every time.
I don't want to say that nobody has gone out and done anything because you have had individual instances. You had the guy that tried to attack the FBI satellite office in Cincinnati. There are these various kind of like spots. Sporadic.
Yeah, but I tend to agree with Craig on this that they have been pretty rare. And
Trump desperately wants one to happen.
You're just going to always have some kooks.
Yeah.
But the model was January 6th, and so I think the likelihood of that happening again is even higher now. The fact that you have those defendants being painted as political prisoners and martyrs, essentially. So the fact that they've been lionized in this way, I think just is also going to be a motivator for people to continue doing that. The only motivation there to not do that is thankfully the prosecutions that have existed. But I don't know. I think maybe some of that's outweighed by the message that's being sent.
Well, and I keep flip-flopping back and forth on this, but it doesn't take more than several hundred or several thousand people, trying to storm the Capitol
to overwhelm,
to create a big problem.
Yeah,
because they don't staff the organization in such a way to deal with that problem, so they're not ready for it. So it doesn't take. It's not like 2 million people have to go to D.C. to make something happen. It could be hundreds or thousands of people to make something happen.
To stay on this very dark tone that we all have, I'm also very afraid of November for local election workers. Because these people are unpaid. They're volunteers mostly. And if you talk to local election offices throughout the country, they're having trouble recruiting people they've relied on in past cycles because these people don't want to make themselves targets. They don't want their names and faces out there. They're afraid of what's going to happen in the voting booths on election day, whether or not they're going to be directly challenged for, hiding votes or for misplacing ballots.
Well, I think that happens more to the management of the elections more than, I've been a poll worker and I don't know if I would do it again. But I worry about like the election commissioners and Secretary of States and
I agree.
People in leadership roles.
But I do think in some of these very high profile precincts and some of the swing states, like what we saw in Fulton County with the two election workers, I think we'll see more of that in the very high profile visible places where there's a lot on the line and where you're going to have both campaigns having observers, and how aggressive do those observers get? Do they put calls of action out to supporters? We've seen this scenario before.
So we have the election in November. When do you think it'll be called? In other words, will it be a week later? Will it be 2 weeks? Will it be all these? Because you talk about there'll probably be some contention. 2 or 3 states. There'll probably be some infighting. We're not going to certify the election. We need to do a recount.
Let's look at it this way. Multiple people got fired at Fox when they called it too soon Arizona for Biden.
Right.
So that's a lesson learned. So I don't know if anybody, no matter how it turns out, is going to call it that night. I think it's going to be.
And they didn't call it that night, did they?
No, they didn't. But with so many. 2020 was unique because with so many mail-in and Dropbox ballots, they had to count those. We're not going to have anywhere near that level of that again. So we might be very capable of calling this election night or the day after. I don't know if they will just because of sensitivity to the issue. The one thing I think you guys are missing too is that the far-right media refers to January 6th as a Fedsurrection. It is common knowledge amongst people of the right that the feds were embedded in 1-6 and they caused all the problems. They were the ones who moved the barriers. The cops were in on it too that let you in. So from 1-6, all they've been told is do not participate, do not do it, don't, because this is a setup by the feds.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's working against them.
But there's some cognitive dissonance there. So how do they explain or rationalize away the behavior of the people they're lionizing?
They don't. They
martyrs?
Can't. All this is Fedsurrection's a neat name.
The same message that was sent then, which some people still say today, is that it was all Antifa. So it can't be that these people are victims, that what they did was warranted, but also Antifa was involved, but also it was the feds.
Nobody's really examining their thoughts or behavior.
It doesn't line up.
You just shout, feds did it, Fedsurrection, Antifa. No white person was involved. It's all good.
Right. I feel like, so we have a light note to end on. I know we're way over and it's been really dark.
Oh, it's been way over. What light note do you want to end on? What are you doing this summer, Mike? Going on vacation anywhere?
Yeah, we'll be pulling some trailer. We'll be pulling some trailer. That's what we'll be doing. So
you got into camping during the pandemic?
During the pandemic, yeah.
When it was one of the few activities I guess you could still do?
Well, the idea is that you could get away and you have your hotel room with you. So, but yeah, we're going to upstate. We're going to upstate Michigan, around the top part of Michigan, and then in August we're going out to Oregon. Are
you going into the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan?
Yeah, we're going to Mackinac. I think that's
okay. So Mackinac has the huge bridge, which is awesome.
I don't know. That's not part of my.
I've been
trip.
on a bike trip through there. It's really pretty.
Yeah. So then
I
we're
wanted to go up there too.
And then we're going to Oregon, all the way out to Crater Lake.
We just got back from Oregon. We went to Cannon Beach, where the Goonies Rock was. It was pretty fun.
Going to Cape Disappointment, which is I guess that's the terminus of the Lewis and Clark Trail.
Oh.
So when they finally got
I thought that was my wife describing our marriage, Cape Disappointment. My wife's name is Jody too, so Jody means wife to Mike and I, just a generic term. I don't think we're doing anything really this summer. Well, no, we're going to Europe in September, so that'll be fun.
You always go in places all the time.
Yeah, so later this month, I am going to about 5 or 6 days Ireland. So I'm doing Dublin, Cliffs of Mordor, and then a little jaunt over to Scotland, to Edinburgh. So that'll be fun. Some domestic trips planned. I'm still trying to figure that out through the rest of the year. I want to make it up to Yosemite, so that's on the bucket list.
Have you been to Yellowstone?
No, I actually want to Yellowstone too. That's high up there. Yeah,
gotta go.
Yeah, don't camp in Yellowstone.
Well, if you can, I would. But
we camped in July at Yellowstone. It got down to 30 degrees.
Oh,
We froze our ass off.
Yeah,
this was after getting hailed on.
You're one of those tent campers, aren't you?
We were on motorcycles.
Oh, well,
so we rode through the rain, through the hail. Then we got to camp, and it was cold as shit.
No thanks. Yeah, not doing that.
Yeah.
We pull an Airstream, so it's it's clamping.
All right, Mike, that's our hour. Thanks so much for coming back for episode 200.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.